Welcome back to the deep dive. So if you've been on this journey with us, you'll know we spent a lot of time on cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. And that gave us this amazing map to understand the what. What are these unhelpful patterns we keep falling into?
And that was a crucial first step. CBT lets you look back retrospectively and see that whole cycle, that famous automated default setting where a trigger happens and it leads to this familiar and usually, unproductive behavior. It teaches you why you keep driving off the road.
Exactly. But that's the real question, isn't it? The one that keeps people feeling stuck.
Yeah.
How do you stop driving off the road in the moment?
Mm-hmm.
Which is why we've shifted our focus now to Dialectical Behavioral Therapy, or DBT. We sort of introduced it last time as the next step. It's like the skills upgrade that gives you the actual tools to grab the steering wheel back when the crisis is already happening.
Yeah, it's the difference between, say, knowing the theory of self-defense versus having the actual drilled-in moves. We're moving from the whiteboard to the sparring ring.
Okay, and today we are starting at the very, very beginning. Because if that autopilot, that default setting, is running 90% of your day, well, you need something fundamental to change. You need that one single skill to even begin to interrupt the loop and create a moment of choice.
And that skill is mindfulness. It is the hardcore, non-negotiable starting point for this entire DBT skill set. And we really have to push past the popular, sometimes mystical, fashion brand version of the word. We need to understand it as a deeply pragmatic, almost technical skill.
Okay, let's strip it down then. What's the technical definition of mindfulness in this context?
Simply put, mindfulness is the intentional skill for working with your attention, for cultivating a conscious mode of being. It's the tool that lets us move beyond that retrospective analysis, looking at our actions hours later, to achieve real-time awareness.
So noticing what is happening as it happens.
Exactly. Internally, externally as it happens. Because without that real-time awareness, every other skill we learn, emotional regulation, distress tolerance, it's all built on sand. This is the prerequisite.
I think the challenge of even defining it says a lot about its complexity. I mean, you're trying to translate the word mindfulness into other languages.
Mm-hmm.
It's notoriously difficult.
It is.
If you look at, say, Slovak or a lot of other Slavic languages, there just isn't one word that really captures everything. It's got awareness, consciousness, introspection, all kind of wrapped up together.
That's true, and that's why we stick to the English term. It's less about some, poetic state of mind and more about technical work. If you asked a programmer to define it, they might say it's like a specific app designed to dramatically improve the performance of your focus. It's that pragmatic.
And that pragmatism. Man, it hits hard when I look at my own journey. For the longest time, I could only analyze things ex post. I'd look back the next morning and go, okay, that stressor, A, led to me snapping at my colleague, B, which led to all this fallout, C.
Mm-hmm.
And that self-awareness is huge progress, don't get me wrong. But it's not enough to stop the reaction in the moment when the pressure is actually on.
Precisely. That retrospective analysis is the map. Mindfulness is the GPS giving you real-time guidance. Because when you're under intense stress, your biology, your fight or flight response, it kicks in way faster than your rational mind. Mindfulness is really the only tool we have to slow that response down enough to interrupt that cycle.
But it's not a switch you can just flip.
No. And you have to be radically non-judgmental about your practice, especially in the beginning. Some days you'll be aware, and most days you won't. And that is perfectly okay. That's normal.
We've called it the mental gym before, and I think that's exactly right. You don't walk out with a six-pack after 2 visits. You walk out sore, maybe a little discouraged, but the training has started.
And consistency is the currency here.
Mm-hmm.
The more you train, the stronger your what we call attention muscle becomes, and the more likely you are to be able to use it when the perceived threat is high. And it will always be a process. The level of stress will always challenge the skill.
Okay, so if the skill is mindfulness and the outcome is real-time awareness, then the practice itself has to be all about the battle for our attention.
It is. Let's make this tangible. I want you and everyone listening to just pause for a second and genuinely ask yourself, who or what successfully competed for and stole your attention in the last hour?
Well, the easy answers are always external, right? The glowing screen, the vibration in my pocket, the urgent email notification. Technology has basically weaponized the demand for our focus. Someone on the other side of the planet can ping me and instantly just hijack my immediate physical reality. Everything and everyone is fighting for our focus.
That's the visible arena, but the hidden fight, the internal competitors, they are far more pervasive and often far more devastating to our peace. Our own internal dialogue is a master thief of the present moment. We are constantly preoccupied with two versions of ourselves that don't actually exist in reality.
The past self and the future self. It's just constant, unproductive time travel.
Exactly. So first you have the past self, which drives rumination. This is just dwelling on past mistakes, past failures, or even past glories. I can't believe I said that 5 years ago, or I was so much more successful back then. It's often just a form of self-flagellation, replaying this old movie reel in your mind.
And then the other one, the future self, which is all about worry and anxiety. The thought loop is always conditional. I'll finally be okay when I get that promotion, or if I was just richer or thinner. It's all anxiety about things that haven't even happened.
And this is the core psychological conflict. Why do we do this? Why do we prefer to be tourists in the past and future? Because the present moment often hurts. The present is messy. Maybe you're dealing with financial issues, relationship problems, personal shortcomings. So your mind, in this protective, automated move, distracts you. It launches you into the past where the outcome is known and feels safe, or into the future where you can fantasize about perfect solutions. It's like a mental anesthetic against present discomfort.
Wow, that totally reframes the goal. So mindfulness isn't just about resisting a notification on my phone. It's about stopping my own brain from dragging me into this unproductive time travel, all to protect me from a reality my ego doesn't like.
That's the profound insight. The goal is to move from being a puppet controlled by all these external pings and internal habits to an agent, someone who has the conscious ability to choose where to aim that beam of attention. It's that crucial pivot point where we move from reacting to everything to consciously responding.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we interrupt that internal time travel?
Oh.
If I catch myself ruminating about some mistake from 2018, what's the tactical move?
You need an interrupt loop. The first question to ask that ruminating past self is this. Is this thought leading to actionable learning, or is it just self-flagellation?
Mm.
And 90% of the time, it's the latter. If it's not leading to an action you can take right now, then you thank the thought for its input and consciously shift your attention back to the physical present.
And for the future self, the one that's always anxious and planning.
The tactical maneuver there is simple, but it's difficult, you ask. Is this productive planning, or is it unproductive worry? Planning is, I need to send an email at 9 a.m. tomorrow. That's productive. Worry is, what if they misinterpret the email and I lose my job and I can't pay my rent and my cat hates me?
Right. The spiral.
Yes, if it spirals past the necessary next step, you interrupt it, you acknowledge the worry, and you refocus. That conscious interruption, that's the first act of mindfulness.
So if the problem is our attention, then the solution has to be training it.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to that word, meditation. And I think for a lot of people, myself included at first, that word just conjures up images of gurus and incense and, a fear of looking ridiculous. We have to cut through that baggage.
Absolutely. We have to ditch the mysticism and see it as pure brain calisthenics. Meditation is just a pragmatic tool, an exercise routine. It's designed specifically to train the two dimensions of attention, the location, the posture, the close, all of that is secondary. What matters is understanding the mechanics of how you train attention.
Okay, let's ground this in a metaphor. We've talked about visualizing our attention as a strong beam of light, or maybe a laser. And we have to learn two completely opposite skills for controlling this light.
Exactly. The first skill is what we call zoom in meditation. We're taking that beam of attention and sharpening it into a highly focused laser aimed at one single point. The whole purpose here is to ground ourselves, to achieve deep concentration by anchoring ourselves firmly in physical reality.
And you've broken this down into 4 levels or layers of reality, moving from the really concrete stuff to the more abstract. And we have to start with the easiest one.
That's right. The first layer is the physical or sensory layer. This is the most essential starting point. You focus your attention on something tangible, the feeling of your body on the chair, the temperature of the air on your skin, the smell of coffee, or most fundamentally, your breathing. If all else fails, you must return to the breath.
Okay, so physical first. What's next?
The second is the relational or emotional layer. Once you can anchor physically, you move outward. So you might focus your attention on a specific emotion, like gratitude for a person, or the feeling of love for your child. It's a physical feeling, but it's tied to a relational context.
And
there is the cognitive layer. This is focusing on the stream of thoughts itself, but, and this is critical, not engaging with them. You're like someone standing on the bank of a river, watching the water flow by. You notice a thought, I need to call the plumber. But you don't jump in the river and chase after it. You just observe it as an object passing by.
And the last one is the most complex.
Yes. The fourth is the transcendental layer. This is perceiving yourself as part of something much larger, a family, a company, nature, a community. It's very difficult to achieve concentration here, but it's incredibly powerful for gaining context, as we'll see later.
That physical layer really resonates. I remember when I shifted from listening to a podcast while running to just consciously focusing on the run itself. The physical effort, the sound of my feet on the pavement, the wind. It immediately forced my time-traveling brain right back into the present moment.
That is the ultimate hack for concentration. If you're struggling with a mental hijack, physical intensification is your best friend. If you're running, sprint for a minute. If you're swimming, do a burst of speed. The body's immediate need to survive and deal with physical sensation will override the mind's tendency to wander. The mind just doesn't have the bandwidth to ruminate about that email from 2018 when it's focused on getting oxygen to your muscles.
And if even that high-intensity focus doesn't work, the fail-safe is always the breath.
Always the breath. Slow, deep, regulated breathing isn't just an anchor, it's a physiological intervention. By slowing your diaphragm, you are actively telling your nervous system that you are safe. You're overriding the anxiety signal and forcing a return to that physical layer.
Okay, so the laser beam, zoom in, makes sense. It's focus concentration. But now we have the opposite skill, zoom out meditation, where we diffuse the light into this soft, unfocused glow. My first question is, how is this not just zoning out or daydreaming?
That is the critical distinction. Zoning out is passive distraction. Zoom out is conscious non-focus. We sometimes even call it mindless, not in a negative way, but in the sense that the mind is intentionally emptying itself of specific content. The purpose isn't concentration, it's detachment. We want to avoid pathologically identifying with the intense feelings that come up.
So, how do I practice conscious non-focus? It sounds like a contradiction.
The technique is often described as sit and wait. You're not looking for anything specific. You're actively doing nothing mentally. The way to stabilize this is to focus on the space between things, the gaps. Look for the empty space between you and your coffee cup. Listen for the silence between the sounds. Observe the tiny pause that exists between one thought ending and the next one beginning. You're looking for the void, the canvas that everything else is painted on.
That feels incredibly abstract and hard. Why is this skill so crucial if it's so difficult to get your head around?
Because this is the birthplace of non-identification, which is the highest form of self-control. When you can successfully zoom out from an intense experience, let's say intense anger or panic, you create a moment of choice, a gap. And in that gap, before you react, you gain leverage. Without the gap, the stimulus leads instantly to the automated response. With the gap, you can choose.
I see. And this detachment, this must be what ties into radical acceptance, that big concept in DBT.
Yes. Zoom out enables radical acceptance. It means acknowledging reality exactly as it is without fighting it, wishing it were different, or arguing with it.
Okay, wait. I need to clarify this. Because if I accept a bad situation, a failure, an insult, a financial problem, doesn't that mean I've just surrendered? Doesn't mean I approve of what happened or that the other person won?
Absolutely not. And that's the most common trap. Acceptance is not approval. It is not resignation or surrender. Resignation implies defeat. Radical acceptance is just the recognition of reality. It's saying, this is what is happening. It has already occurred. Arguing with it is only going to cause me more pain. It's pragmatic. Once you stop wasting energy fighting what already is, you free up all that cognitive energy to plan your next move. It's the opposite of surrender. It is the starting point for effective action.
That makes sense. So the two skills are complementary. Zoom in anchors me in reality. Zoom out stops that reality from crushing me. Okay, so now we need a structure to actually use these skills.
Right, and that's the RAIN method. It's the instructional manual for combining our two skills, focus and detachment, into a repeatable sequence for when we get triggered. It's a non-proprietary acronym used in a lot of practices, a very effective 4-step process for working with intense emotions.
And the key instruction, the one that's so easy to forget, is that you have to consciously apply all 4 steps for it to really work.
Exactly. Let's walk through them. First is our recognize.
Or identification.
Yes. This step demands the immediate use of that zoom-in skill. You have to acknowledge, identify, and label what is happening right now. Is it a thought? A physical sensation? You have to bring the object of your attention into sharp focus.
This is the aha moment. just identifying the first signal.
And often, that first signal is somatic. It's in the body. You might not recognize the emotion of anger right away, but you will recognize the somatic signal. The sudden rapid heartbeat, the jaw clenching, the knot in your stomach, the heat in your face. You stop the internal tape and consciously label that physical experience.
Okay, R is recognize. Then A is for accept. This is where we lean towards that zoom out mindset, right?
Yes, this is non-judgment. We acknowledge that the experience is happening without the immediate reflex to judge it. When you feel that rapid heart rate, the automated reaction is to judge it. This is bad, or I shouldn't feel this way, or this panic is so unproductive.
But judging the feeling just adds another layer of suffering on top of the initial pain. It's the difference between feeling anxiety, the first pain, and then feeling anxious about being anxious, which is a secondary optional pain.
That's precisely it. Acceptance is the refusal to engage in that secondary pain. You just acknowledge, my heart is beating fast, I feel hot, this is reality right now. You're refusing to assign any moral weight to it. This step takes immense discipline because that internal critic is so loud.
Okay, so RA, then I investigate. We go back to the focused attention, the zoom-in laser. But you're saying we're not analyzing, we're observing. That feels like a very subtle but important distinction.
It is the most common place where people slip up. Investigation means sustained, curious attention on the physical and emotional details of the experience. You're holding the light beam steady on the symptom. You notice the heart rate, where exactly in your body you feel the tension, the specific story running through your mind.
But the trap is letting it spiral into that deep analysis, the mental time travel. That, why did this happen to me? Or, if only I'd done X 3 weeks ago.
Correct. You're gathering real-time data about the event and your response as it unfolds, but you're not chasing the cause. Not yet. If you feel anger, you investigate where the anger lives in your body. Is it a knot in your chest? Is it tingling in your hands? You just hold your attention there without analyzing the justification for the anger.
Then finally, N non-identification. This requires the full zoom-out skill to really achieve detachment. And this step, you said, defines the effectiveness of the whole thing.
It does. The core idea is this. You are more than your current thoughts or feelings. This intense feeling, this anger, fear, shame, it's a temporary event happening within you, but it is not the totality of who you are.
We mentioned the trap of pathological attachment to our ego. That sounds pretty intense. Can you break that down in a practical sense?
It means we often fuse our sense of self with our current state. If I feel shame, I don't just think I feel shame, I think I'm a shameful person. If I experience failure, I am a failure. Pathological attachment is when the emotion becomes our identity. The goal of non-identification is to create enough distance to observe the emotion and say, that is anger, and I am the conscious being observing that anger.
So we're looking for a conscious, healthy gap without tipping over into something like clinical dissociation, which is a pathological disconnection.
Exactly. Non-identification is about realizing that your ego, that part of you that's screaming and reacting and defining itself by the crisis, is just a small part of your larger self. And that creates the critical distance you need for conscious choice. It ensures the automated emotional response doesn't get to dictate your actions.
Okay, this structure is powerful, but it's all theory until you test it under fire. And before I share a personal story, we need to properly set up that most complex concept, moving from personal non-identification to that transcendental layer, seeing the bigger picture.
Yes, this is what we call scaling mindfulness, from self to system. Up until now, we've been focused inward. My reaction, my attention, my ego. The transcendental layer forces us to apply that same detached focus outward to a larger system.
So if a conflict involves me, my family, and a few other people, we're not seeing them as separate fighters, but as a single ecosystem.
Precisely. Let's introduce the concept of the fractal entity. Think of a healthy body. It's made of organs, cells, tissues, all working together. If one organ, say the liver, starts malfunctioning, the whole body feels pain and launches a crisis response to get back to balance.
So the fractal entity is that group, the family, the workplace, viewed as one single body.
Right. When a conflict happens, the transcendental view sees it not as person A versus person B, but as the entire entity signaling that it's in distress and trying to reestablish stability. This radically shifts how you make decisions beyond just your own immediate self-interest.
Okay, with that framework, let me share the real-life stress test. I had a crisis involving my son's school.
Walk us through it, the setup, and how you tried to deploy RAIN.
The setup was maximum stress, an unexpected, urgent meeting about a serious behavior issue with my son. I walk in, and it's the teacher, the deputy principal, and they're already in formal record-keeping mode. The stakes felt incredibly high. And I consciously primed myself on the way there. Just focus. Remember rain.
Mm-hmm.
The moment they started giving this structured negative feedback about my child, it triggered pure biological fight or flight. I mean, the most basic instinct, protect your offspring.
The evolutionary core. You're instantly driven by that protective parent persona.
And so I started with R and I.
Mm.
I recognized the crisis. I immediately investigated the somatic signals. My heart rate just double-timed. I felt this intense internal agitation and this overwhelming urge to react aggressively, cross-examine them, defend my son, shift the blame. I even noticed a specific physical thing. I literally pushed my chair back from the table. My body was creating a defensive boundary.
And that physical action pushing the chair, that was the investigation giving you that split second of awareness, a crucial micro-intervention.
Then came A, acceptance. Despite everything in me wanting to interrupt and argue, I accepted the situation. I told myself, this is reality. I don't like it, but it's happening. So I just listened without interruption. And that allowed me to deploy my second micro-intervention. I consciously started that slow, deep, regulated breathing to signal safety to my nervous system, which was just going haywire.
That somatic regulation is often the bridge. It stabilizes the body enough for the mind to get to that detachment skill.
And the final critical step was N, non-identification. Instead of identifying with that automatic, protective, aggressive parent persona, the part of me screaming, my blood is under attack, I chose not to. If I had followed that script, the meeting would have just devolved into a fight. It would have satisfied my ego, but would have destroyed the relationship.
What did that choice feel like internally?
It felt like a conscious step backward. I could see the anger and anxiety as these objects passing through my mind, and I chose to inhabit a different persona, the measured problem-solving parent. And because I didn't identify with the panic, I was actually able to listen to the facts, genuinely validate their concerns, and then work with them to create a constructive plan.
You successfully created the gap. You refused to let the emotional intensity dictate the outcome. The emotions were there, but they weren't in the driver's seat anymore.
Yeah, and the result was a functional, productive meeting, which is a vastly different outcome than my automated past self would have gotten. It really proved the power of non-identification under pressure. But then we took it a step further. With that transcendental idea, we had 5 parties involved. Me, my son, the other boy, the other boy's mother, and the teacher. This group is our fractal entity.
And you realize that if this entity is experiencing friction, if one organ, your son, is malfunctioning in that context, the crisis meeting is just the entity trying to heal itself.
Exactly. And the benefit of that perspective was huge. It helped me avoid judgment. I stopped seeing the other mother's extreme reaction or the teacher's rigid procedure as personal attacks. I could understand why they reacted that way. They were just parts of the entity, trying to restore balance from their own stressed-out perspectives.
This higher view lets you act for the collective health of the whole system, not just for the ego defense of your son. It forces a much more effective, holistic decision.
Right. And it led to my final decision. I realized the core friction wasn't just the fight itself, but the strained relationship between my son and the teacher. That was impacting the whole ecosystem. So I decided I needed to address that secondary problem, even though it meant starting a difficult conversation that would cause temporary discomfort for the teacher. Because I knew that from the entity's perspective, the long-term health of that relationship was essential for everyone's stability.
You chose complexity and long-term systemic health over the immediate comfort of a simple but incomplete resolution. That's a profound application of that transcendental layer. It shows that the highest form of mindfulness isn't just about personal peace. It's about effectively and non-judgmentally navigating complex relational systems.
This has been a really practical look at a concept that so often gets lost in abstraction. I think the takeaway for me is clear. Mindfulness is not passive. It's not just waiting. It is aggressive, active training of your internal attention muscle.
It's the shift that moves us from saying, I regret that reaction the next day, to having the real-time capability to choose your response in the moment. It's the fundamental skill required for all the behavioral change that comes after.
And since it's a trainable skill, we have to leave everyone listening with a practical challenge.
Start small, start intentional, and make it non-negotiable. Use the zoom-in skill on the physical layer. Do it for short, intense bursts. Even 5 seconds is enough to start. When you're walking from your desk to the door, focus only on the feeling of your feet on the ground. When you wash your hands, focus only on the temperature and the sensation of the water.
So during your most automated moments, the commute, showering, waiting for coffee, just pull that beam of attention back to one physical anchor.
Absolutely. And once you feel stable with that, gradually increase the complexity. Try focusing on the quality of a specific positive emotion. That's the relational layer. And then introduce the advanced skill. Practice zoom out by searching for the gap, that empty space between your thoughts.
And when a crisis inevitably hits, because life guarantees crises, consciously attempt the full rain sequence. It is the structured intervention that can change everything.
Ultimately, mindfulness is like sharpening a camera lens. It doesn't change the reality in front of you. The image is the same, but it lets you see that reality clearly enough and with enough detachment to choose your next move effectively.
So now that we have this foundational skill, the ability to see and identify those intense feelings in real time, next time, we move straight into the action skills. We're going to discuss how to regulate those intense physical and emotional symptoms and how to access the crucial concept of the why mind when your emotions are screaming their loudest.
And that's where the power of DBT truly unfolds. We'll talk to you then.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Take care.